The crystal champagne flute trembled in Adrian Sterling's hand as the waitress's lips moved close to his ear. "That's the wrong formula," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the restaurant's symphony of clinking silverware. In that moment, the billionaire's entire empire, built on a revolutionary energy catalyst, teetered on the edge of catastrophe. $100 million hung suspended between truth and deception. Welcome to a story where genius hides behind an apron and a single whisper can topple titans. Comment your city below. Let's see how far this tale travels. The September rain drummed against the windows of Aurelia Manhattan's crown jewel of fine dining, where reservations were currency and tables were thrones. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across marble floors, polished to mirror perfection, while somewhere in the kitchen, a Michelin-starred chef orchestrated culinary symphonies that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Adrian Sterling sat at table 7, the power table they called it, his fingers drumming against mahogany as he reviewed the contract one final time. At 38, he commanded boardrooms with the same ease most people ordered coffee. His dark suit, tailored on Savile Row, hung perfectly on his athletic frame, and his steel-gray eyes had dissected 1,000-page merger documents in the time it took others to read a menu. "The numbers are extraordinary," Richard Hayes said from across the table, his voice honeyed with the practiced charm of old money. The rival tycoon's smile never quite reached his eyes, a detail Adrian had noticed in their first meeting 3 months ago. "Your catalyst will revolutionize green energy. My consortium is prepared to invest the full $100 million, but we need assurance about the formula's stability." Dr. Robert Kendrick, Adrian's chief scientist, leaned forward with the eagerness of a man about to collect his lottery winnings. His thin fingers pushed wire-rimmed glasses up his nose, a nervous tic Adrian had witnessed countless times in boardrooms and laboratories. "Mr. Hayes, I stake my reputation on this formula. The Sterling-Kendrick catalyst represents 6 years of rigorous development. Every calculation has been verified, every variable tested." Adrian watched the exchange with the detached interest of a chess master observing pawns. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, not in this game where fortunes shifted with the stroke of a pen. Yet the formula had passed every test, survived every scrutiny. His own team of physicists and chemists had validated Kendrick's work independently. The catalyst could store and release energy at efficiencies that made current battery technology look like stone tools. "Gentlemen," Adrian's voice cut through their discussion like a blade through silk. "We're not here to debate settled science. We're here to sign papers that will change the world." The waitress approached with practiced invisibility, the kind of servant whose presence was meant to be felt only in the perfection of service, never in personality. Isabella Rossi had perfected this art over 18 months at Aurelia, becoming a ghost who filled glasses and cleared plates, while titans of industry carved up the world over Wagyu beef. Her uniform was pristine black and white, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized the sharp intelligence in her hazel eyes, eyes that most patrons never bothered to meet. She moved with the fluid grace of someone who had learned to navigate tight spaces without disturbing the air, a skill honed not in service training, but in cramped university laboratories, where a single wrong movement could ruin months of research. As she refilled Adrian's water glass, her gaze fell upon the papers spread across the table. Chemical equations filled the margins of the contract, Kendrick's way of impressing investors with his expertise. Most people would see only incomprehensible symbols, a foreign language of science. Isabella saw a death sentence. The formula stared back at her like a ghost from her past. Each symbol, each subscript, each coefficient burned into her memory from countless nights in Columbia University's chemistry department. But it was wrong, catastrophically, murderously wrong. The error was subtle, hidden in the interaction between two seemingly stable compounds that under specific conditions would create a chain reaction. Not immediately, perhaps not for months, but eventually, inevitably, any facility using this catalyst would become a bomb. Her hand trembled, sending a drop of water onto the pristine tablecloth. Adrian's eyes snapped to her the first time in 18 months. He'd truly looked at her rather than through her. "Is everything all right?" His tone carried the mild annoyance of someone whose important moment had been interrupted by the help. Isabella's mind raced through 1,000 calculations in the space of a heartbeat. She could walk away, let these men sign their papers, and seal their fates. It wasn't her problem. She'd learned that lesson 6 years ago when the academic world had chewed her up and spat her out when her own professor had stolen her work and left her with nothing but debt and shattered dreams. But she thought of the workers who would staff the facilities, the families living near the plants, the catastrophe that would unfold when Kendrick's corrupted version of her formula finally revealed its fatal flaw. Her conscience, that stubborn survivor of all her disappointments, wouldn't let her remain silent. She leaned closer to Adrian, close enough that her words would reach only him, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of lavender in her hair, a detail that would haunt him later. "That's the wrong formula," she whispered. The words hung in the air like a spell, freezing the moment into crystalline stillness. Adrian's pen stopped moving. His eyes, those legendary instruments of intimidation that had stared down hostile takeover attempts and congressional hearings, locked onto hers. "Excuse me." The question came out sharp enough to draw blood. Isabella straightened her professional mask, sliding back into place, but her eyes never left his. In them, Adrian saw something unexpected. Not fear, not deference, but the absolute certainty of someone who knew they were right. "My apologies, sir. Would you like more water?" The deflection was smooth, professional, but Adrian Sterling hadn't built an empire by ignoring his instincts. And right now, every instinct screamed that this woman, this waitress, had just dropped a bomb into his perfectly orchestrated world. "Gentlemen," Adrian said, his voice carrying a new edge that made both Hayes and Kendrick look up. "I need a moment. Perhaps you could review Section 12 while I make a call." He stood, his movement fluid and purposeful, and walked toward the restaurant's private phone alcove. As he passed Isabella, he spoke without looking at her, his words pitched for her ears alone. "Supply closet. Third door on your left. 2 minutes." Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs as she watched him disappear into the shadows beyond the dining room. She could walk away now, clock out, disappear into the anonymity of New York's millions. She'd done it before, vanished from the academic world into the service industry, trading her lab coat for an apron. But something in Adrian Sterling's eyes, a flash of genuine concern beneath the corporate armor, made her feet move toward the supply closet. The space was cramped, filled with linens and cleaning supplies lit by a single bulb that cast harsh shadows. Adrian was already there, his presence filling the small room like a storm contained in a bottle. "You have 30 seconds to explain yourself," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Starting now." Isabella took a breath, tasting the metallic tang of fear and determination. "The catalyst formula on your contract, it's based on my doctoral thesis from Columbia. But it's wrong. Someone changed it, introduced an error in the stabilization sequence. Under normal conditions, it works fine. But if the temperature exceeds 380 Kelvin, or if it's exposed to certain electromagnetic frequencies, the molecular bonds will cascade. You're not building energy storage facilities. You're building bombs." Adrian's expression didn't change, but Isabella saw his jaw tighten. "That's a serious accusation. You're claiming to be what, a chemistry PhD working as a waitress?" "I was a PhD candidate." Isabella corrected, her voice gaining strength. Until Professor Marcus Albright stole my research, published it under his name with modifications I never approved, and had me expelled when I tried to prove ownership. Your Dr. Kendrick was his star student. He's using my work, but he doesn't understand it well enough to see what his changes have done. Even if that's true, it is true. The words burst out of her with 6 years of suppressed rage. Every night, I serve champagne to people celebrating deals worth more than I'll see in a lifetime, and I stay quiet. But I can't stay quiet about this. That formula will kill people. Maybe not today, maybe not next month, but eventually. And when it happens, when those facilities explode, the blood won't just be on Kendrick's hands or yours. It'll be on mine for staying silent. Adrian studied her face, reading it like a contract, looking for tells for deception. He'd built his fortune on reading people, on knowing when someone was lying. This woman, this waitress with fire in her eyes and chemistry equations in her head, was telling the truth. "Prove it," he said finally. "If you're who you say you are, prove it." Isabella's mind raced. The binding coefficient in equation 7, Kendrick has it at 0.847. It should be 0.832. The difference seems negligible, but it changes the entire thermodynamic profile. Ask him to explain why he chose that number. He won't be able to because he doesn't understand the quantum mechanics involved. He just copied and modified without comprehension. That's not proof. That's an assertion. Then test me, Isabella challenged, stepping closer, her fear transmuting into determination. Give me any chemical equation, any formula. Ask me anything about molecular chemistry, quantum mechanics, thermodynamics. I spent 6 years of my life in those fields before your friend Kendrick helped destroy my career. Adrian pulled out his phone, typed rapidly, then showed her the screen. It displayed a complex chemical equation, something he'd pulled from his company's research database. Isabella studied it for less than 10 seconds. It's a theoretical framework for graphene-based supercapacitors. The math is elegant, but there's an error in the third line. You're assuming linear scaling of surface area to capacitance, but at the nanoscale quantum effects introduce a logarithmic component. Should I continue? For the first time since she'd whispered in his ear, Adrian Sterling smiled. Not the practiced smile of boardrooms and photo ops, but something genuine and sharp. What's your name? Isabella Rossi. Well, Ms. Rossi, you've just become the most interesting person in this building. But I need more than your word. I need proof that can stand up in a boardroom, that can stop a $100 million deal. Then give me access to your technical files, Isabella said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was asking. Let me show you exactly where Kendrick went wrong. Let me prove that he stole my work and corrupted it into something dangerous. Adrian considered this, weighing risks and rewards with the speed of someone accustomed to split-second decisions worth fortunes. I could lose everything if you're wrong. You'll lose everything if I'm right, and you do nothing, Isabella countered. Along with the lives of everyone who'll work in those facilities. The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. Finally, Adrian nodded. Tonight, after the restaurant closes, my office, Sterling Tower, 42nd floor. Come alone, tell no one. If you're lying, if this is some elaborate corporate espionage scheme, I'll destroy you so thoroughly that waiting tables will seem like a dream compared to what's left of your life. And if I'm telling the truth, then we stop a catastrophe and you get your life back. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Ms. Rossi. Why didn't you speak up sooner? You've been here 18 months. Surely you've seen the Sterling Kendrick catalyst mentioned in the papers. Isabella's expression hardened. Because I learned 6 years ago that the truth doesn't matter if no one believes you. I had no proof then, just my word against a tenured professor and his golden boy. But those equations on your contract, those are proof. Kendrick was careless. He put the smoking gun right there in black and white. Adrian left without another word, returning to his table where Hayes and Kendrick waited with poorly concealed impatience. Isabella watched from the service station as he sat down, picked up his pen, then set it down again. "Gentlemen," she heard him say, "I've had second thoughts. I need 24 hours to review some technical details." Hayes's face flushed red. "Adrian, we've been negotiating for 3 months. Everything's been verified." 24 hours, Richard. Surely a deal of this magnitude deserves one final review. Kendrick's nervousness escalated, his fingers drumming against the table. "Mr. Sterling, I assure you, every calculation has been triple-checked. There's no need for delays." "Nevertheless, I insist." Adrian's tone brooked no argument. "We'll reconvene tomorrow evening. Same time, same place." The meeting dissolved in a flurry of tense handshakes and forced pleasantries. As the men departed, Adrian's eyes found Isabella across the dining room. The look lasted less than a second, but it carried a weight of expectation that made her knees weak. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Isabella's hands moved through the motions of service while her mind raced through calculations, remembering the precise details of her original formula, the elegant solution she'd discovered in her 4th year of graduate work. She'd been so proud, then so naive about how the world really worked. At 11 p.m., Aurelia finally closed its doors. Isabella changed out of her uniform in the staff room, her hands shaking as she pulled on jeans and a sweater. Her colleague Maria noticed her distraction. "You okay, Bella? You've been off all evening." "Just tired," Isabella lied, forcing a smile. "Long day." She took the subway to Midtown, watching her reflection in the dark windows as the train rocketed through tunnels. Who was she to challenge men like Sterling and Kendrick? She was nobody, a failed PhD candidate, a waitress living in a studio apartment in Queens, sending half her paycheck to her parents in New Jersey to help with her father's medical bills. But she was also the woman who'd solved one of the fundamental problems in energy storage, who'd spent 70-hour weeks in the lab perfecting equations that could change the world. That woman had been buried under rejection letters and betrayal, but tonight she was clawing her way back to the surface. Sterling Tower rose into the night sky like a glass and steel monument to ambition. The lobby was nearly empty, just security guards who looked at Isabella with suspicion, until she gave Adrian's name. A quick phone call, and suddenly she was in an express elevator shooting up to the 42nd floor. The executive level was a different world, all marble and mahogany, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of Manhattan that looked like a circuit board of lights. Adrian waited in his office, a space larger than most apartments, dominated by a desk that could have been carved from a single tree. He'd removed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, and for the first time Isabella saw him as something more than a corporate titan. There was a weariness in his shoulders, a weight that came from carrying an empire. "Before we start," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk, "I had my security team run a background check on you. Isabella Maria Rossi, born in Newark, graduated summa cum laude from Rutgers, accepted to Columbia's chemistry PhD program on a full scholarship. Expelled in your 5th year for academic misconduct, specifically falsifying research data." Isabella's hands clenched in her lap. "I never falsified anything. That was Albright's accusation when I tried to prove he stole my work. He had tenure reputation connections. I had nothing but the truth, and that wasn't enough." The Academic Review Board sided with him. The Academic Review Board consisted of his friends and colleagues. Would you expect justice from a jury of your business rivals? Adrian pulled out a laptop, sliding it across the desk to her. Show me. Every file related to the Sterling Kendrick catalyst is on this machine. Prove to me that we're sitting on a disaster. Isabella's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up documents, equations, simulation data. As she worked, she talked, explaining the elegant simplicity of her original discovery, how she'd found a way to store energy at the quantum level, creating a battery that could hold 1,000 times more power than anything currently available. The key, she said, her voice gaining the confidence of expertise, is in the molecular arrangement. See this structure. It creates a quantum well trapping electrons in a metastable state. But Kendrick's modification here, she highlighted a section of code. He's changed the binding energy. He probably thought he was improving efficiency, but he's actually created a potential cascade failure. Adrian leaned forward, his eyes tracking her explanations. He might not understand every detail, but he understood. Enough. How long before it fails? Depends on conditions. Could be months, could be years, but eventually something will push it past to the critical threshold. A power surge, an unusually hot day, interference from nearby electronics. When that happens, all the stored energy releases at once. How much energy are we talking about? Isabella pulled up a calculator, input numbers. Based on your proposed facility specifications, each unit would release energy equivalent to about 50 tons of TNT. The color drained from Adrian's face. And we were planning to build 12 facilities. 12 bombs, Isabella corrected grimly, scattered across the country in populated areas. Adrian stood pacing to the window, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. Kendrick's been my chief scientist for 3 years. He came highly recommended, published papers, conference presentations, all based on my work, Isabella said bitterly. Check the publication dates. Everything significant he's produced started appearing 6 months after I was expelled. Why didn't you fight back, Sue? Go to the media? Isabella laughed, but there was no humor in it. With what money, what proof? Albright was clever. He changed just enough to claim independent discovery. And who would believe a disgraced grad student over a respected professor and his protege? I tried Mr. Sterling. I sent letters to journals, contacted lawyers, reached out to journalists. No one cared. The story was too complicated, too technical, and I was too nobody. Adrian turned from the window, decision crystallizing in his eyes. We need to confront Kendrick, tonight. He'll deny everything. Not if we're smart about it. Adrian picked up his phone, dialing rapidly. Robert, it's Adrian. Yes, I know it's late. I need you at the office immediately. We've discovered something remarkable about the catalyst, a potential enhancement that could double our efficiency. Bring all your original research notes. Yes, all of them. He hung up, a predator's smile playing at his lips. He'll come. His ego won't let him resist the chance to show off. He looked at Isabella. I need you to stay hidden at first. Let me draw him out, make him comfortable. Then we'll spring the trap. You believe me? It wasn't a question, but wonder colored Isabella's voice. Ms. Rossi, I've built my fortune on 2 principles: trust your instincts and verify everything. My instincts said you were telling the truth. The last hour of verification confirmed it. Your work is brilliant, by the way. The real version, not Kendrick's bastardization. For the first time in 6 years, Isabella felt something she'd thought was dead validation. Someone who mattered, someone with power, believed her. While they waited for Kendrick, Adrian asked her about her original research, her process, her inspiration. Isabella found herself talking freely, the words tumbling out like water through a broken dam. She explained how she'd been inspired by quantum tunneling effects in photosynthesis, how plants achieved nearly perfect energy transfer at the molecular level. I spent 2 years just on the theoretical framework, she said, her eyes bright with remembered passion. Everyone said it was impossible, that quantum effects couldn't be maintained at room temperature. But nature does it every day in every leaf. I just had to figure out how to replicate it. And you did. I did. God, I was so proud. I remember calling my parents at 3 a.m. when I finally got it to work. My father cried. He'd worked construction his whole life to put me through school, and I'd finally done something that justified his sacrifice. What happened after the expulsion? Isabella's expression shuddered. I moved back home. Spent 6 months in bed, basically. Depression is a hell of a thing, Mr. Sterling. It wasn't just losing my career, it was losing my identity. I was a scientist. Without that, I didn't know who I was. But you survived. My mother's tough love and my father's medical bills. He was diagnosed with lung cancer, 30 years of breathing construction dust. I needed work, any work. Aurelia was hiring, and they didn't care about my academic history, just whether I could carry plates without dropping them. The elevator chimed and both of them tensed. Adrian gestured for Isabella to move to an adjoining conference room where she could watch through a glass partition, one-way glass, that would keep her hidden. Dr. Robert Kendrick entered Adrian's office with the bouncing energy of an excited puppy. His hair was disheveled, his shirt hastily tucked in, but his eyes gleamed with anticipation. Adrian, this is extraordinary news. What enhancement have you discovered? Adrian leaned back in his chair, playing the role of the intrigued but cautious executive. Before we discuss that, Robert, I need to understand your process better. Walk me through the original development of the catalyst. Of course, Kendrick launched into what was clearly a well-rehearsed presentation. Isabella watched from behind the glass, her nails digging into her palms, as he described his breakthrough, his innovative approach to quantum energy storage. The binding coefficient, Adrian interrupted smoothly. Why did you set it at 0.847? Kendrick's rhythm faltered slightly. Well, that's the optimal value for stability. But how did you arrive at that specific number? Through extensive testing and calculation. Sweat beaded on Kendrick's forehead. Show me the calculations. They're complex. It would take hours to go through them all. Adrian stood moving around the desk with the casual grace of a circling shark. Robert, I'm about to invest $100 million based on your formula. I think I deserve to understand every variable, don't you? Of course, but... And this molecular structure here... Adrian pulled up the formula on his screen. Explain to me why you chose this particular arrangement. Kendrick's explanations grew increasingly vague, technical jargon piling up to hide his lack of understanding. Isabella watched him flounder, remembering how he'd been in Albright's classes, brilliant at memorization, terrible at original thought. You know what's interesting, Robert? Adrian's voice dropped to a conversational tone that somehow managed to be more menacing than shouting. I showed your formula to another chemist earlier. They had some fascinating observations. What chemist? Who? Instead of answering, Adrian opened the conference room door. Why don't you ask her yourself? Isabella stepped into the office, and Kendrick's face went through a spectacular range of emotions. Confusion, recognition, fear, and finally desperate calculation. Isabella? His voice cracked. What are you doing here? Hello, Robert. She kept her voice steady, professional. Still having trouble with binding coefficients, I see. This is ridiculous, Kendrick blustered, turning to Adrian. This woman is a fraud, a failed student who was expelled for falsifying data. You can't seriously be listening to her. Falsifying data, Isabella repeated slowly. Like claiming my thesis as your own, like taking my formula and modifying it without understanding the underlying physics. Those were independent discoveries based on published research. My research, which Albright stole and published under his name. Isabella pulled out a flash drive from her pocket. Funny thing about digital footprints, Robert. I've been working as a waitress for 18 months, lots of time to think to plan. I recovered my original files from Columbia's servers' timestamps intact, showing my work predating Albright's publications by 2 years. It was a bluff she'd tried to recover those files and failed, but Kendrick didn't know that. His face went pale. Adrian picked up his phone. I'm calling my legal team. And the FBI industrial espionage involving potentially catastrophic public safety risks should interest them. Wait. Kendrick's composure shattered completely. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Albright said she'd never fight back, that she'd disappear. The formula worked in simulations. Simulations you didn't understand, Isabella interrupted. You changed variables without grasping their interdependencies. Did you even run a full thermodynamic analysis? Albright said it wasn't necessary. Adrian's expression was ice. You built a $100 million deal on stolen, corrupted work that you didn't even fully test. Kendrick's legs gave out, and he collapsed into a chair. Hayes knew. Richard Hayes, he knew the formula was questionable. He had his own scientists review it, and they raised concerns. But he said, as long as it worked initially, we could fix any problems after the deal closed. He just wanted to lock you into the contract before you discovered. Discovered what? Adrian's voice was deadly quiet. That Zenith Corp Hayes' company had already started building facilities using an earlier version of the formula. 3 facilities already operational. If your catalyst failed, it would look like your fault, not his. He could sue for damages, take over Sterling Industries. Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. 3 facilities already operational with the flawed formula. Kendrick nodded miserably. In Nevada, Texas, and Ohio. We need to shut them down, Isabella said urgently. Immediately. Every day they operate increases the risk of catastrophic failure. Adrian was already on his phone barking orders to his security chief, his legal team, his board of directors. The office became a war room with Isabella at the center, finally given the authority to use her expertise for something more than memorizing wine pairings. As dawn broke over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Isabella stood at the window, exhaustion weighing on her shoulders, but her spirit soaring. In one night, she'd gone from invisible servant to the key player in preventing a national disaster. Adrian joined her at the window, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He offered her one, and they stood in companionable silence, watching the city wake up. What happens now? Isabella asked. Now we fix your formula, the real one. We stop Hayes before anyone gets hurt, and we make sure you get the credit you deserve. He paused, studying her profile. I'll need a new chief scientist. Interested? Isabella nearly dropped her coffee. You're offering me Kendrick's job. I'm offering you the chance to see your work change the world the way it was meant to. Full credit, your name on every patent, and a salary that will make your time at Aurelia seem like volunteer work. I don't have a PhD. The expulsion. We'll fight that too. With Kendrick's confession and the evidence we're gathering, we'll clear your name. Columbia will have to reverse their decision. Isabella felt tears prick her eyes. Tears of relief, vindication, and something that felt dangerously like hope. Why are you doing this? Adrian was quiet for a moment. Because someone should have done it 6 years ago. Because brilliance shouldn't be buried under lies and politics. And because, he turned to look at her directly, because in 30 seconds of watching you work tonight, I saw more genuine innovation than in 3 years of Kendrick's presentations. Mr. Sterling, Adrian, if you're going to save my company and prevent a national catastrophe, you should probably call me Adrian. Isabella smiled her first real smile in years. All right, Adrian, where do we start? We start by calling those facilities in Nevada, Texas, and Ohio. Then we call the Department of Energy, the FBI, and every regulatory body I can think of. After that, he raised his coffee cup in a toast. After that, we rebuild your formula the right way and show the world what Dr. Isabella Rossi was always capable of. I'm not a doctor yet. You will be. As the morning sun climbed higher, bathing the office in golden light, Isabella Rossi stood at the precipice of her new life. 6 years of silence had ended with 4 whispered words. The waitress who'd been invisible 12 hours ago was about to become the most important scientist in the country. But first, they had 3 facilities to shut down a conspiracy to unravel and a formula to perfect. The real work was just beginning, and for the first time in years, Isabella couldn't wait to get started. The phone on Adrian's desk rang the first of what would be hundreds of calls that day. He answered it, his voice carrying the authority of someone about to reshape an industry. Sterling here. Yes, I need to speak with the Secretary of Energy. Tell him it's a matter of national security. As Adrian marshaled his resources, Isabella turned back to the laptop, pulling up her old notes, the ones she'd recreated from memory during countless sleepless nights. Her fingers flew across the keyboard equations, flowing like poetry, each symbol a note in the symphony of discovery she'd been forbidden to play for so long. The whisper that had stopped a billionaire was about to become a roar that would shake the foundations of American industry. And Isabella Rossi, waitress, survivor, genius, was finally ready to be heard. The Secretary of Energy's voice crackled through the speakerphone, tense with barely controlled panic. Mr. Sterling, if what you're telling me is accurate, we're looking at potential casualties in the thousands. Isabella leaned closer to the phone, her fingers still dancing across the keyboard, as she pulled up simulation after simulation. Secretary Morrison, the cascade failure won't happen immediately, but every hour those facilities operate increases the probability exponentially. We need evacuation protocols initiated within the next 12 hours. Adrian watched her work with growing admiration. The timid waitress from Aurelia had vanished, completely replaced by a scientist whose brilliance commanded the room. She'd taken over his office like a general claiming territory, transforming the executive space into a makeshift laboratory of laptops, calculations, and rapidly sketched diagrams on every available surface. "Who is this, Morrison demanded. "I thought Kendrick was your chief scientist." "Dr. Kendrick has been relieved of his duties," Adrian said smoothly, his eyes finding Kendrick still slumped in the corner chair, 2 security guards flanking him. "This is Isabella Rossi, the original developer of the catalyst formula. She's the only person who fully understands the technology." "Rossi, I've never heard of her." Isabella's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice professional. "That's because my work was stolen 6 years ago, Mr. Secretary. But right now we don't have time for that story. The facility in Nevada is showing the highest risk factors. It's been operational the longest, and it's located in a desert climate with extreme temperature variations." She pulled up a map on Adrian's wall-mounted screen, red dots marking the 3 facilities. "The Texas facility is newer, but it's near a petroleum refinery. If it fails, the secondary explosions could level everything within a 5-mile radius. Ohio is the most populated area, positioned just outside Columbus." Morrison's breathing was audible through the phone. "Jesus Christ. How did this get past every safety inspection?" "Because on paper it works perfectly," Isabella explained, highlighting sections of code. The flaw only becomes apparent under specific conditions that weren't part of standard testing protocols. It's like a heart that beats normally until exposed to a specific frequency, then goes into fatal arrhythmia. Adrian's phone buzzed with an incoming call from his legal team. He stepped away to answer it, leaving Isabella to coordinate with Morrison. She didn't miss a beat, rattling off technical specifications and emergency procedures with the confidence of someone who'd been preparing for this moment for years. "We need those facilities powered down in stages," she instructed. "Not all at once that could trigger the exact cascade we're trying to prevent. Start with Nevada, reduce power output by 20% every hour. I'm sending you the protocols now." Kendrick suddenly stood, his face flushed with desperate energy. "This is insane. You're trusting someone who was expelled for fraud. The formula is safe. I've run hundreds of simulations." Isabella turned to him, her eyes blazing. "Simulations based on incomplete understanding. Tell me, Robert, what happens when the quantum tunneling effect intersects with electromagnetic interference at precisely 2.4 gigahertz. Kendrick's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That's not a realistic scenario." "It's the exact frequency of most wireless routers," Isabella said coldly. "Every facility has dozens of them. You built a bomb that could be triggered by Wi-Fi, and you didn't even know it." The revelation hung in the air like a physical presence. Adrian ended his call and returned to the group, his expression grim. "My legal team just informed me that Hayes has disappeared. His office says he took an emergency flight to Switzerland 2 hours ago." "He knew," Kendrick whispered, his face ash gray. "God, he knew this would happen. He said something about insurance policies, about being protected if anything went wrong." Adrian's security chief, a former Marine named James Chen, entered the office with a tablet in hand. "Sir, we've been monitoring the facility's systems remotely. There's unusual activity at the Nevada site." Isabella snatched the tablet, her eyes scanning the data streams. "Someone's increasing power output, not decreasing it. They're pushing it toward critical threshold." She looked up at Adrian, fear naked in her eyes. "Someone's trying to trigger a failure deliberately." Adrian was already moving, grabbing his phone and dialing. "Get me the Nevada State Police now, and patch me through to the facility's security team." The next hour unfolded like a nightmare played at double speed. Isabella worked frantically to remote access the facility's systems, while Adrian coordinated with law enforcement. The Nevada facility's security chief came on the line, his voice strained. "Mr. Sterling, we've got a situation here. 3 men entered the facility an hour ago with paperwork from Zenith Corp. They've locked themselves in the control room, and they're not responding to our attempts at communication." Isabella's fingers flew across multiple keyboards, code streaming across screens. "I'm trying to override their controls remotely, but they've installed some kind of firewall. It's sophisticated professional work." "Can you break through?" Adrian asked. "Maybe, but not in time. At the rate they're increasing power, we have maybe 40 minutes before cascade failure becomes inevitable." She stood abruptly, decision crystallizing in her eyes. "I need to be there, on site. If I can access the manual override panels, I can shut it down." "The facility is in Nevada. That's a 5-hour flight." "You have a helicopter on the roof," Isabella interrupted. "I saw the landing pad when I looked up your building earlier. How fast can it get us to Newark Airport? You must have a jet there." Adrian was already moving toward his private elevator. "James, get the chopper ready. Call ahead to have the Gulfstream fueled and ready for immediate takeoff." He looked at Isabella. "You said us. You don't have to come." "It's my formula," Isabella said, firmly grabbing the laptop and following him. "My responsibility, and I'm the only one who knows exactly how to stop it." The elevator shot upward, and Isabella felt her stomach drop, though whether from the acceleration or the magnitude of what they were attempting, she couldn't tell. Kendrick was left behind with the security guards, his protests fading as the doors closed. On the roof, the helicopter blades were already spinning, the aircraft trembling with barely contained energy. Isabella had never been in a helicopter before, but she climbed in without hesitation, her mind already racing through shutdown procedures. Adrian strapped in beside her, handing her a headset. 20 minutes to Newark, then 3 hours to Nevada if we push the engines to their limits. That leaves us 10 minutes margin for error, Isabella said, her voice tinny through the headset communication system. Then we don't make any errors. The Manhattan skyline fell away beneath them, the city shrinking to a glittering circuit board. Isabella worked on the laptop throughout the flight, trying every back door she could think of to access the facility's systems. Adrian watched her work, occasionally fielding calls from his team from Morrison, from the FBI agents now racing toward the Nevada facility. "Tell me about the original breakthrough," Adrian said during a brief lull. "How did you solve the storage problem?" Isabella's fingers never stopped moving, but a ghost of a smile touched her lips. "I was actually trying to solve a completely different problem. I was studying how certain bacteria can survive in extreme environments by entering a quantum coherent state. They essentially pause their electrons in a kind of biological quantum computer. And you figured out how to replicate it. Not replicate exactly, more like translate. I found a way to create artificial quantum wells using carbon nanostructures. The electrons get trapped in a superposition state, storing massive amounts of energy in a tiny space." Her expression darkened. "Kendrick's modification disrupts the quantum coherence. Instead of a controlled release, you get a cascade collapse. Every electron releases its energy simultaneously." They transferred to the Gulf Stream at Newark, the jet already cleared for immediate takeoff. As they climbed into the sky, Isabella's phone rang. It was her mother. "Isabella, where are you? You didn't come home last night." "Mom, I can't explain right now, but I'm okay. I'm fixing something. Something important." "Is this about your research, Bella? You need to let that go." "I can't let it go, Mom. People's lives are at stake. I'll call you when I can, I promise." She ended the call, her throat tight with emotion. Adrian pretended not to notice the tears she quickly wiped away. "Your family doesn't know?" he asked gently. "They know I was expelled. They don't know why. I couldn't bear to tell them that everything they'd sacrificed for me was stolen." She stared out the window at the clouds below. "My father spent his entire life savings on my education. He was so proud when I got into Columbia. My daughter the scientist, he'd tell everyone. After the expulsion, he never said it again." "He will," Adrian said with quiet certainty. "After today, the whole world will know who you really are." The pilot's voice crackled through the cabin speakers. "Mr. Sterling, we're beginning our descent into Nevada. There's been a development at the facility." Adrian grabbed the cabin phone. "What kind of development?" James Chen's voice was tense. "Local police tried to breach the control room. The intruders have welded the doors shut and disabled the ventilation system. They're willing to die in there." Isabella's blood ran cold. "If they've disabled ventilation, the temperature in that room will climb rapidly. That'll accelerate the cascade. We might have even less time than I thought." The landing was rough, the pilot pushing the limits of safety to get them on the ground. A convoy of black SUVs waited on the tarmac, engines running. Isabella and Adrian threw themselves into the lead vehicle, which tore off toward the facility before the jet's engines had even stopped spinning. The facility appeared on the horizon like a technological mirage in the desert, all gleaming metal and solar panels. But as they got closer, Isabella could see the chaos. Emergency vehicles surrounded the building, their lights painting the desert in reds and blues. Smoke was beginning to rise from one section of the structure. "That's the control room," the security chief said, meeting them at the gate. "Temperature inside is already at 45 Celsius and climbing." Isabella jumped out of the SUV before it had fully stopped. "Where are the manual override panels?" "Basement level, but you need to understand those panels haven't been used since installation. We're not even sure they still work." "They'll work," Isabella said, already running toward the building. "They have to." Adrian followed her into the facility, the temperature hitting them like a physical wall. The building's cooling systems were failing, overwhelmed by the heat generated by the overloading catalyst units. Warning klaxons filled the air, and emergency lights bathed everything in hellish red. The basement was even worse. Isabella could hear the catalyst units humming a sound that sent primal fear through her body. That hum meant they were approaching critical resonance. The manual override panels were hidden behind a locked cage that hadn't been opened in years. Adrian grabbed a fire axe from the wall and smashed through the lock with 3 powerful swings. Isabella threw open the panel doors, revealing a maze of switches, dials, and analog gauges that looked like they belonged in a 1960s power plant. "This is ancient," she breathed, then started tracing connections with her fingers. "But analog might save us. It's not connected to the main computer system, so the intruders can't control it." Her hands moved with surgical precision, flipping switches in a specific sequence. Each switch controlled a different section of the catalyst array, and they had to be powered down in exactly the right order to prevent triggering the cascade. "Isabella," Adrian's voice was tight with warning. "Look at this gauge." She followed his pointing finger to a temperature reading that made her heart stop. Core temperature 378 Kelvin. They had 2 degrees before the automatic cascade would begin. "I need you to go to that panel," she instructed Adrian, pointing across the room. "When I tell you, flip switches 7 through 12, but only in odd-even sequence. 7, 8, 7, 10, 11, 12. Can you do that?" 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, Adrian repeated. "No, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Odd numbers first, then even." "Got it." Isabella returned to her panel, sweat streaming down her face. The basement temperature had to be over 50 Celsius now. Her fingers slipped on the switches, and she had to force herself to slow down to be precise. One wrong sequence, and they'd trigger exactly what they were trying to prevent. "On my mark," she called to Adrian. 3, 2, 1, mark. They moved in synchronization, years of Isabella's theoretical knowledge, combining with Adrian's ability to perform under pressure. The humming changed pitch, dropping from a scream to a whine. "It's working," Isabella breathed, then louder. "It's working." But the temperature gauge continued to climb. 379 Kelvin. 379.5. The control room, Isabella realized with horror. The heat from the control room is conducting through the building's infrastructure. Even with the catalyst powering down, the ambient temperature is still rising. She looked at the maze of pipes running along the ceiling, her mind racing through thermodynamic calculations. The cooling system. If we can redirect the cooling system to focus entirely on the core chamber. "The controls for that are in the room with the intruders," Adrian said. "No, there's another way." Isabella grabbed the fire axe Adrian had discarded. "The pipes. If we break the right pipes, we can manually redirect the flow." She studied the pipe layout for 5 seconds that felt like 5 hours, then swung the axe at a specific junction. Water exploded from the broken pipe, ice cold and shocking in the superheated air. Isabella ignored it, swinging again at another pipe, then another, creating a cascade of water that began flooding the basement. "You're flooding the electrical systems," Adrian shouted over the roar of water. "Water's a better thermal conductor than air," Isabella shouted back. It'll draw heat away from the core faster than any cooling system. The water was ankle-deep now, then knee-deep. Electrical panels sparked and died, but the analog switches remained functional. The temperature gauge flickered, held at 379.8 Kelvin for a heart-stopping moment, then began to drop. 379.5, 379, 378. Isabella collapsed against the panel, her legs giving out from exhaustion and relief. Adrian caught her before she hit the water, holding her upright as the facility's emergency teams finally made it to the basement. Core temperature stable at 375 Kelvin and dropping, someone reported over the radio. Catalyst array is in safe shutdown mode. They were helped out of the flooded basement, wrapped in emergency blankets, despite the desert heat. Isabella couldn't stop shaking, adrenaline and exhaustion warring in her system. Through the chaos of emergency responders and federal agents, she saw the intruders being led out of the facility in handcuffs. One of them looked familiar, though she couldn't place him through her exhaustion-blurred vision. "The other facilities," she said, suddenly grabbing Adrian's arm. "Texas and Ohio. Already secured," James Chen reported, appearing at Adrian's side. "We had teams standing by. Both facilities are in controlled shutdown following the protocols you established. No casualties, no cascade failures." Isabella felt the last of her strength leave her. She'd done it. They'd prevented catastrophe. But as the adrenaline faded, the magnitude of what had almost happened crashed over her. Thousands of people could have died. Cities could have been leveled. "Ms. Rossi," an FBI agent approached, his expression serious. "We need to debrief you on everything you know about this technology and the theft of your research." "Tomorrow," Adrian said firmly, his arm still supporting Isabella. "Ms. Rossi has just prevented a national catastrophe after working for 20 straight hours. She'll answer your questions tomorrow." The agent looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Adrian's expression made him nod and step back. As they walked toward the waiting vehicles, Isabella's phone rang again. This time it was a number she didn't recognize. "Don't answer that," Adrian warned, but she'd already accepted the call. "Hello, Isabella." The voice was cultured, amused, and chillingly familiar. "Richard Hayes." "You son of a bitch," Isabella breathed. "Such language from a brilliant scientist. I wanted to congratulate you on your heroics today. Very impressive. Of course, you've only delayed the inevitable." "What are you talking about? Did you think 3 facilities were all we built?" "My dear girl, I've been planning this for years. There are 7 more facilities in countries with, shall we say, less stringent safety regulations, all running modified versions of your brilliant formula." Isabella's blood turned to ice. "You're lying." "I check the news tomorrow. A terrible industrial accident in Bangladesh, perhaps. Or maybe Venezuela. So many possibilities. You saved America today, Isabella. But can you save the world?" The line went dead. Isabella stood frozen in the desert heat, the phone slipping from nerveless fingers. Adrian caught it, his expression darkening as he saw her face. "What did he say?" "There are more facilities," Isabella whispered. "International. He's built more facilities with the flawed formula." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Then we stop him. All of them." "How? We don't even know where they are. We don't have jurisdiction." "I have resources Hayes doesn't know about," Adrian said quietly. "International connections, private security forces, enough money to make governments listen. We'll find them." Isabella looked at him, this billionaire who'd believed a waitress's whispered warning, who'd risked everything on her word. "Why are you doing this? Really?" Adrian was quiet for a moment, looking out at the desert horizon. "My sister died in an industrial accident 5 years ago, a chemical plant explosion in Michigan. Turned out the company had been ignoring safety warnings for months, all to save money. I couldn't save her, but maybe I can save others. The confession hung between them, intimate and unexpected. Isabella reached out, taking his hand, the gesture feeling both natural and extraordinary. "We'll stop him," she said, and it sounded like a vow. As they climbed into the SUV to head back to the airport, Isabella's mind was already racing, planning, calculating. She'd spent 6 years as a victim of the system. But today she'd proven that brilliance couldn't be buried forever, that truth had a way of surfacing when it mattered most. The waitress from Aurelia was gone. In her place stood Dr. Isabella Rossi, not officially, not yet, but in every way that mattered, and she had work to do. The sun was setting over the Nevada desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that reminded Isabella of chemical reactions of transformation and change. In the distance, the facility stood silent and safe, a monument to disaster averted. But Hayes was still out there, and the game was far from over. Isabella closed her eyes, already seeing the equations she'd need to solve, the patterns she'd need to recognize. She'd whispered 4 words that changed everything. Now she'd have to shout loud enough for the whole world to hear. Adrian's hand found hers in the gathering darkness of the vehicle, a silent promise of partnership in whatever came next. The pilot reported they were cleared for immediate takeoff back to New York, where an army of lawyers, scientists, and federal agents waited to debrief them. But sitting there in the back of the SUV, her hand in Adrian's, her mind already racing toward solutions, Isabella felt something she hadn't experienced in 6 years, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The war for her formula and for justice had only just begun. The Gulf Stream touched down at Teterboro just after midnight, but the Sterling Tower blazed with light like a beacon in the Manhattan darkness. Isabella had dozed fitfully on the flight, her dreams filled with equations that morphed into explosions, with Kendrick's face melting into Hayes's mocking smile. Adrian hadn't slept at all, spending the entire flight coordinating with international contacts, calling in favors from London to Tokyo. "I've got teams mobilizing in 12 countries, he told Isabella, as their car wound through empty streets toward Midtown. "Private investigators, industrial safety inspectors, anyone who might help us locate Hayes's facilities." Isabella stared at her reflection in the window, barely recognizing the woman looking back. Her clothes were still damp from the flooded basement, her hair a tangled mess, but her eyes burned with purpose. He'll have hidden them well. Shell companies, false documentation, probably even fake safety certifications. Then we need Kendrick to talk. Really talk. Not just panicked confessions, but detailed intelligence. They found Kendrick exactly where they'd left him, though now he was in Adrian's conference room, with FBI agents, lawyers, and enough recording equipment to document every syllable. He looked up when Isabella entered, and she saw something break in his expression. "Isabella, save it." She cut him off, taking a seat across from him. "I don't want your apologies. I want information. Every communication you had with Hayes, every document you signed, every facility you know about." Special Agent Diana Chen, a sharp-eyed woman who'd taken lead on the federal investigation, slid a tablet across to Isabella. "We've been going through Dr. Kendrick's emails. There's references to something called Project Prometheus." Isabella's breath caught. In Greek mythology, Prometheus stole fire from the gods. He's not just building facilities, he's planning something bigger. Kendrick's hands trembled as he reached for a glass of water. Hayes talked about revolutionizing global energy markets. He said governments would have no choice but to buy our technology once it was the only option left. "The only option?" Adrian leaned forward. "What does that mean?" He never explained fully, but Kendrick swallowed hard. There were discussions about strategic failures, controlled explosions that would look like accidents destroy competing energy infrastructure. The room went silent except for the hum of recording equipment. Agent Chen's expression had gone from serious to grave. He's planning terrorist attacks. Industrially disguised terrorist attacks. Isabella corrected her mind, racing through the implications. If major power plants fail catastrophically, if refineries explode, if the entire energy infrastructure becomes unreliable, governments would be desperate for an alternative, even a dangerous one. Adrian stood abruptly pacing to the window. He'd cause a global energy crisis, then position himself as the savior with the only solution. Except his solution is built on my corrupted formula, Isabella said bitterly. He'd be replacing one disaster with another, but by the time anyone realized it, he'd have already collected billions in contracts. Agent Chen pulled up a map on the conference room's main screen. Based on Kendrick's emails, we've identified possible facility locations in Bangladesh, Venezuela, Nigeria, and Indonesia. But these are just guesses based on shipping manifests and financial transfers. Isabella studied the map, then turned to Kendrick. You helped design these facilities. There must be something unique about them, some signature that would make them identifiable. Kendrick was silent for a long moment, then spoke quietly. The cooling systems. Hayes insisted on a specific cooling system design, said it was more efficient. It requires a unique component, a proprietary heat exchanger manufactured by only one company. Which company? Agent Chen demanded. Thermal Dynamic Solutions based in Singapore. Hayes owns it through about 6 shell companies. Adrian was already on his phone. James, I need you to track every shipment from Thermal Dynamic Solutions in the past 2 years. Cross-reference with industrial construction permits in developing nations. While Adrian's team worked on tracking the shipments, Isabella found herself drawn back to the equations. She pulled up Kendrick's modified formula on the conference room screen, annotating it with her corrections, showing the FBI agents exactly how the corruption worked. The elegance of Hayes's plan is its plausible deniability, she explained. These facilities will work perfectly for months, maybe even years. When they eventually fail, it'll look like simple mechanical failure or human error. Without understanding the quantum mechanics involved, no investigation would ever trace it back to the formula itself. But you understand it, Agent Chen said. I do. Which is why Hayes will either try to buy me or kill me once he realizes I'm not going away. Adrian's head snapped up from his phone. That's not happening. He's right about one thing, though, Isabella continued, ignoring Adrian's protective instinct. I need to document everything. Create a paper trail so clear that even if something happens to me, nothing is going to happen to you. Adrian interrupted, his voice hard. I'm assigning you a security detail immediately. Isabella wanted to argue, but the memory of Hayes's cold voice on the phone stopped her. The man was playing for stakes worth billions, potentially trillions, if his plan succeeded. He wouldn't hesitate to eliminate one former waitress turned whistleblower. James Chen entered the conference room with a laptop, his expression triumphant. Found them. 7 facilities all received shipments from Thermal Dynamic Solutions. Bangladesh, Venezuela, Nigeria, Indonesia as suspected, but also facilities in Pakistan, Egypt, and the Philippines. Isabella moved to the laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she pulled up satellite imagery of each location. They're all positioned strategically, near major populations but not in city centers, close enough to existing power infrastructure to seem like legitimate competition. We need to shut them down, Agent Chen said. It's not that simple, Adrian interjected. These are sovereign nations. We can't just march in and demand they close facilities that, as far as they know, are legitimate business operations providing jobs and promising clean energy. Isabella stood slowly, an idea forming. But we can prove they're dangerous. The same flaw exists in all of them. If I can access their systems remotely, I can demonstrate the cascade potential without actually triggering it. That's illegal, Agent Chen pointed out. Hacking into foreign infrastructure. So is planning mass murder disguised as industrial accidents, Isabella shot back. Besides, I wouldn't be hacking. I'd be accessing systems using authorization codes that Kendrick is about to provide. Right, Robert. Kendrick looked between Isabella and the FBI agent, then nodded slowly. I have master access codes. Hayes gave them to me in case of emergencies. Agent Chen stood up. I need to make some calls. This is above my authorization level. She looked at Isabella. Don't do anything until I get back. The moment the door closed behind her, Isabella turned to Kendrick. The codes. Now. Isabella, every minute we wait, those facilities get closer to their failure points. The codes, Robert. Kendrick pulled out his phone, accessing an encrypted app. As he read off the alphanumeric sequences, Isabella entered them into her system, her fingers flying across multiple keyboards Adrian's team had set up for her. I'm in. She breathed, screens filling with data from the Bangladesh facility. Oh God, look at these readings. They're running at much higher capacity than the Nevada facility was. The heat buildup is already significant. Adrian leaned over her shoulder close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with desert dust and sweat. How long before critical failure? At this rate, maybe 6 weeks. Less if they have a particularly hot day or if there's any electromagnetic interference. She switched to the Venezuela facility. This one's worse. 3 weeks maximum. The door burst open, Agent Chen returning with a man Isabella recognized from news broadcasts, Deputy Director William Foster of the FBI. Ms. Rossi, Foster said without preamble, I understand you can prevent an international catastrophe, but you need foreign government cooperation to do it legally. I need 2 hours and internet access, Isabella countered. I can create a demonstration that will make any government shut these facilities down immediately. Foster studied her for a long moment. You have 1 hour. Agent Chen will coordinate with State Department to alert the affected nations that we have critical safety information to share. Isabella turned back to her keyboards, aware of everyone watching her. The weight of expectation was crushing, but she pushed it aside, focusing on the code flowing across her screens. She began writing a program that would simulate the cascade failure in each facility's control system without actually affecting the physical components. It's like showing someone a movie of their house burning down without actually lighting the match, she explained as she worked. The simulation will run on their monitoring systems, showing exactly what will happen if the cascade begins. 40 minutes into her work, alarms began blaring from one of the screens. The Venezuela facility's readings were spiking dramatically. That's not my simulation, Isabella said, her face paling. Something's actually happening at the facility. Adrian grabbed his phone. James, get me satellite surveillance of the Venezuela facility immediately. The satellite feed appeared on the main screen, showing the facility in real time. Smoke was rising from one of the buildings. There's been an explosion, James reported. Local news is already covering it. 3 workers injured, facility evacuated. Isabella's fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing the facility's data logs. It wasn't the catalyst. Look, someone triggered an explosion in the conventional power supply system. Just enough damage to require the facility to shut down for repairs, but not enough to cause a cascade. Hayes, Adrian said grimly. He's covering his tracks, making it look like random accidents before we can prove they're connected. Isabella's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered on speaker. "Brava, Ms. Rossi." Hayes's voice filled the room. "You're forcing me to accelerate my timeline. Very inconvenient." "You just injured 3 innocent workers," Isabella spat. "Casualties of war, my dear. Though far fewer than if I'd let the cascade occur naturally. You should thank me for my restraint." Foster gestured to his tech team, who immediately began tracing the call. "What do you want, Hayes?" Adrian demanded. "What I've always wanted, to revolutionize global energy. Ms. Rossi's formula, properly implemented, could power the world for generations. The fact that Kendrick corrupted it is unfortunate but fixable." "Fixable," Isabella laughed bitterly. "You have 7 bombs waiting to explode, and you call that fixable?" "I have 7 bargaining chips," Hayes corrected. "Here's my offer. Isabella joins my team, fixes the formula in my facilities, and I pay her $10 million. Everyone wins. Except for all the people you're planning to kill with your controlled failures at competing facilities," Isabella shot back. There was a pause. "I see Kendrick has been talking. How tedious. The offer stands, Ms. Rossi. 10 million, or I trigger all 7 facilities simultaneously. The death toll would be significant." "You're insane," Adrian said. "I'm a visionary. There's often little difference. You have 24 hours to decide. Oh, and don't bother tracing this call. Bounced through 17 countries and 3 satellites. Even your FBI friends won't find me." The line went dead. The room erupted in activity, agents making calls, technicians analyzing data, but Isabella sat frozen, staring at the screens showing 7 facilities, 7 potential disasters. "We're not negotiating with him," Adrian said firmly. "We might not have a choice," Foster countered. "If he can really trigger all 7 simultaneously—" "He can't," Isabella interrupted, her mind racing. "Look at the data patterns. Each facility has a different response time, different thermal coefficients. He could trigger them all at once, but the cascades would occur at different rates. We'd have windows of opportunity to intervene." She stood up, energy crackling through her exhaustion. "But I have a better idea. Kendrick, you said Hayes insisted on specific cooling systems. Were there any other modifications he demanded?" Kendrick nodded slowly. "The control systems. He wanted redundant remote access capabilities. Said it was for security, but it created a back door," Isabella finished. "If I can access one facility's control system fully, I might be able to create a virus that spreads through Hayes's network, locking him out of his own facilities." "That's cyber warfare," Foster warned. "We'd need presidential authorization." "Then get it," Adrian snapped. "We have 23 hours and counting." Isabella was already back at her keyboard's code flowing across screens like digital poetry. She was vaguely aware of the activity around her, Foster on the phone, with Washington Adrian, coordinating with international contacts, Agent Chen briefing State Department officials, but her world had narrowed to the elegance of code and the race against time. 3 hours later, she had it. A digital antibody designed to recognize and neutralize Hayes's control protocols. "It's ready, but I need to upload it directly to one facility's main server. The Bangladesh facility has the weakest firewall." "Do it," Foster said, having received whatever authorization he needed. Isabella initiated the upload, watching nervously as her virus penetrated the facility's systems. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, like dominoes falling, she saw Hayes's remote access credentials being systematically deleted from each facility. "It's working," she breathed. "He's being locked out." Her phone rang immediately. Hayes again, but this time his cultured voice was ragged with fury. "You clever little bitch. Do you know what you've done? Saved lives, Isabella replied calmly. You've started a war you can't win. I have resources you can't imagine, connections in every government, every industry. You think you've won, you've just made yourself a target for the rest of your very short life. Is that a threat, Mr. Hayes? Foster asked, leaning toward the phone. Deputy Director Foster, I presume. No, not a threat, a promise. Ms. Rossi has interfered with billions of dollars in international investments. There are people far less forgiving than I am who will want their pound of flesh. The line went dead. Isabella felt a chill despite the warmth of the room. She'd won this battle, but Hayes was right. She'd made powerful enemies. Adrian moved closer to her, his presence reassuring. We'll protect you. For how long? Isabella asked quietly. The rest of my life I can't live in hiding. I won't. Before anyone could respond, James Chen burst into the room. Sir, we have a problem. Someone's breached Sterling Industries servers. They're downloading everything: financial records, research data, personal communications. Adrian's face went white. Hayes, he's retaliating. Isabella spun back to her keyboards. I can stop him. The same vulnerability he used, I can trace it back, use it to access his systems. That would be illegal, Foster warned. So is industrial espionage. Isabella shot back, already typing. Besides, I'm not Isabella Rossi, PhD candidate. I'm just a waitress who doesn't exist in any system that matters, remember? Her fingers flew across the keyboard, chasing Hayes's digital trail through cyberspace. She could see him downloading Adrian's files, but she could also see where he was routing the data. A server farm in Switzerland, protected by military-grade encryption. I can't stop the download, she admitted, but I can corrupt the data he's stealing, make it useless. Do it, Adrian said without hesitation. Isabella executed her counterstrike, watching as the files Hayes was stealing became infected with her virus, turning from valuable intelligence into digital garbage. But as she worked, she noticed something else in Hayes's server's files about her. Hundreds of them. Photos, documents, even recordings. He's been watching me, she said quietly. For months, maybe longer, since before the restaurant. Adrian looked at the screens, his jaw tightening. He knew who you were. This whole thing, he knew you'd recognize the formula. The implications hit Isabella like a physical blow. He wanted me to see it. He wanted me to react. But why? Before anyone could answer, every screen in the room went black. Then slowly, words appeared in white text. Congratulations, Dr. Rossi. You passed the test. The real game begins now. RH. The screens flickered back to life, but something had changed. Every file about Hayes had been deleted. Every trace of his existence in their systems had vanished. Even the recordings of his phone calls were gone. Impossible, Agent Chen said, frantically checking backup systems. We had multiple redundancies. He was never really here, Isabella said, slowly, understanding dawning. Everything we had on him was digital. He gave it to us, and now he's taken it back. Foster's phone rang. He answered, his face growing increasingly grim as he listened. Understood, he said, finally ending the call. He looked at the room. That was Washington. We're to cease all investigation of Richard Hayes immediately. What? Adrian exploded. He just threatened. He just demonstrated that he can cripple any digital infrastructure he chooses, Foster interrupted. The president has decided that negotiation is preferable to cyber warfare we're not prepared for. Isabella sank into a chair, exhaustion and defeat washing over her. They'd stopped the immediate threat, saved 7 facilities from disaster, but Hayes was still out there, still planning, still watching. So he wins? She asked quietly. No, Adrian said firmly. He's bought himself time, that's all. We know his plan now. We can prepare. Foster gathered his team, preparing to leave. Ms. Rossi, you'll be placed in protective custody. No, Isabella said firmly. I'm done hiding. I hid for 6 years after Albright and Kendrick destroyed my career. I won't hide from Hayes. Isabella, Adrian started, but she cut him off. I'm going to fix my formula. The real one. I'm going to create the energy solution the world actually needs, and I'm going to do it so publicly, so transparently, that Hayes won't be able to touch me without the whole world watching. She stood squaring her shoulders despite her exhaustion. He wants a game, fine, but I'm changing the rules. Adrian studied her for a moment, then nodded. Sterling Industries' entire research division is at your disposal. Whatever you need, whoever you need, it's yours. I need a team, Isabella said immediately. Real scientists, not corporate spies. People who care more about the work than the money. Done. And I need my name cleared, officially. Columbia needs to reverse my expulsion and acknowledge the theft of my work. I'll have my lawyers on it within the hour. Isabella looked around the room at the FBI agents, the technicians, the security personnel. All of them had seen her work, had witnessed her brilliance under pressure. She wasn't the invisible waitress anymore. She wasn't even the discredited grad student. She was Dr. Isabella Rossi, whether the degree was official or not. There's one more thing, she said, pulling out her phone. She dialed a number she knew by heart. Mom, it's me. I know it's late, but I need you and Dad to come to Manhattan tomorrow. There's something I need to tell you. Something about what really happened at Columbia. As she spoke to her mother, making arrangements, explaining as much as she could, Adrian watched her with something that might have been admiration or might have been something more. When she ended the call, he offered her a small smile. Your father's going to be proud. Maybe, Isabella said softly. After I explain why I let him think I was a failure for 6 years. The room was emptying now, FBI agents filing out with their equipment and their classified recordings. Kendrick was led away to continue his cooperation elsewhere. Soon, it was just Isabella, Adrian, and James Chen. The safe house is ready, sir, James reported. Full security detail, completely off-grid. Isabella shook her head. I told you I'm not hiding. Not hiding, Adrian corrected. Resting. You haven't slept in 36 hours. You just prevented an international catastrophe and engaged in cyber warfare with a billionaire terrorist. You need sleep. He was right, and Isabella knew it. The adrenaline that had kept her going was fading, leaving her shaky and hollow. Fine. But tomorrow I start working on the real formula. Tomorrow, Adrian agreed. You start changing the world. As they left Sterling Tower heading for a secure location where Isabella could finally rest, she looked back at the building one more time. Somewhere out there, Hayes was planning his next move. But so was she. The waitress who had whispered 4 words in a restaurant was gone. In her place stood a warrior armed with brilliance and backed by resources she'd never dreamed of. The game, as Hayes called it, was indeed just beginning. But Isabella had spent 6 years learning patience, learning to survive, learning that sometimes the best move was to wait for exactly the right moment to strike. Hayes thought he was playing chess. He didn't realize Isabella had been playing a much longer game, one that started the day her work was stolen and would end only when justice was served. Tomorrow, she would begin building not just a better formula, but a better future. One where brilliance wasn't buried by corruption, where truth mattered more than power, where a whisper could still topple giants. Tonight, though, she would sleep, And for the first time in 6 years, she would sleep without fear, without shame, without the weight of unrecognized genius. She would sleep as Dr. Isabella Rossi and wake up ready to change the world. The safe house was a penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side, so different from Isabella's cramped studio in Queens that she felt like she'd stepped into someone else's life. She'd managed 4 hours of restless sleep before her mind pulled her back to consciousness equations and possibilities swirling through her dreams. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan sparkled in the pre-dawn darkness, a city of ambition that never truly slept. She found Adrian in the living room, 3 laptops open before him, coordinating with teams across the globe. He looked up when she entered, and she saw he hadn't slept at all. "Columbia just confirmed they're shutting down Hayes' facility there," he said without preamble. "That makes 4 out of 7. Columbia." Isabella moved closer, studying the screens. "That wasn't on our list. Your virus did more than lock Hayes out. It sent us a complete map of his network. There were 3 more facilities we didn't know about." Adrian pulled up a global map dotted with red markers. 10 facilities total, all using the corrupted formula. Isabella sank into a chair beside him, the magnitude of Hayes' plan hitting her anew. He was building an empire of bombs. Was, past tense, thanks to you. Adrian closed one laptop and turned to face her fully. "Your parents will be here at 9. Are you ready for that?" "No," Isabella admitted. "How do I explain 6 years of silence, 6 years of letting them believe I was a failure? You tell them the truth, that you were protecting them from a fight you couldn't win, until now." Before Isabella could respond, Adrian's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, and his expression darkened. "It's the Columbia Board of Regents." He put it on speaker. A cultured voice filled the room, one Isabella recognized with a spike of old anger, Dean Margaret Hamilton, who had presided over her expulsion hearing. "Mr. Sterling, I'm calling regarding your interest in the Isabella Rossi matter." "It's not an interest, Dean Hamilton. It's a demand for justice. The university's position remains unchanged. Ms. Rossi was expelled for academic misconduct following a thorough investigation. An investigation run by Professor Albright's colleagues and friends," Isabella interrupted, unable to stay silent. "An investigation that never examined the timestamp evidence I provided." There was a pause. "Ms. Rossi, I wasn't aware you were present." "I'm very present, Dean Hamilton. And I have proof that Albright stole my work. Proof that's now part of an FBI investigation into international industrial espionage." Another pause, longer this time. "Perhaps we should discuss this in person. Can you come to campus this morning?" Adrian started to respond, but Isabella touched his arm. "We'll be there at 11, and Dean Hamilton will be bringing FBI agents and media contacts. This conversation needs to be public." She ended the call before the dean could respond. Adrian looked at her with surprise and something like pride. "The Isabella from the restaurant would never have done that," he observed. "The Isabella from the restaurant hadn't prevented an international catastrophe yet." She stood, energy crackling through her. "I need to work. The real formula I need to document everything before we meet with Columbia." Adrian showed her to a study that had been converted into a makeshift laboratory, complete with computers, whiteboards, and even basic chemistry equipment. Isabella's breath caught. It was everything she'd dreamed of having during her years in exile. She worked with fevered intensity, recreating 6 years of research from memory, correcting Kendrick's corruptions, showing the elegant beauty of the original solution. Adrian watched from the doorway, seeing her transform from the wounded woman he'd met into the brilliant scientist she'd always been. At 8:30, she emerged with a complete presentation, 50 pages of equations, diagrams, and explanations that would revolutionize energy storage. The real Sterling Rossi catalyst, as Adrian had already begun calling it in his mind. "It's perfect," he said after reviewing it. "Even I can understand the elegance of it." Isabella's phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "We're downstairs." The reunion was painful and beautiful in equal measure. Isabella's parents looked older, worn by 6 years of worry and her father's ongoing battle with cancer. Her mother, Maria, a small woman with Isabella's same fierce eyes, gripped her daughter like she might disappear. Her father, Tony, still weak from his latest treatment, simply held her face in his weathered hands and looked at her like he was memorizing every detail. Isabella told them everything. The theft, the expulsion, the years of silence, and finally, the triumph of the past 48 hours. She showed them the news coverage, the FBI statements crediting her with preventing a catastrophe, the documentation of her real formula. "Why didn't you tell us?" her mother asked, tears streaming down her face. "We could have helped, could have fought. With what, Mom? You were already mortgaging everything for Dad's treatment. I couldn't add my problems to that burden." Tony Rossi spoke for the first time, his voice rough but strong. "My daughter, the scientist." He said it like a prayer, like something he'd been waiting 6 years to say again. "I knew. Even when you were serving tables, I knew you were still her." Adrian had given them privacy for the reunion, but now he returned with James Chen and Agent Diana Chen from the FBI. "It's time," he said gently. "Columbia is waiting." The convoy that arrived at Columbia University was impossible to ignore. 3 black SUVs with FBI escorts, journalists who'd been tipped off gathering at the gates, students stopping to stare and whisper. Isabella walked through the campus. She'd been forced to flee, but now she walked with federal agents at her side and one of the country's most powerful billionaires at her back. The meeting was in the same conference room where she'd been expelled 6 years ago. The bitter irony wasn't lost on her. Dean Hamilton was there along with the university president, legal counsel, and surprisingly, Professor Marcus Albright himself. Albright had aged poorly, his once distinguished features now gaunt, his hands trembling slightly as he saw Isabella enter. He tried for his old, commanding presence. "This is ridiculous. I won't sit here and be slandered." "Then stand," Isabella said coldly, taking a seat at the table. "But you'll listen either way." Agent Chen placed a tablet on the table, beginning a presentation that laid out the evidence in devastating detail. Kendrick's confession, the timestamp analysis, Isabella had finally been able to prove the trail of stolen research, leading to near catastrophe. Professor Albright didn't just steal academic work, Agent Chen concluded. His theft nearly resulted in the deaths of thousands. If Ms. Rossi hadn't recognized her own formula and intervened, we'd be dealing with mass casualties across 3 states. The university president, Dr. James Morrison, had gone progressively paler throughout the presentation. If this is true, it's true, Albright said, suddenly his voice hollow. God help me, it's all true. The room went silent. Isabella stared at the man who'd destroyed her life, waiting for the satisfaction of vindication. Instead, she felt only a hollow sadness. Hayes promised me millions. Albright continued, looking at his hands. Said the formula was too valuable to waste on a graduate student's thesis. Said I deserved the credit after years of teaching ungrateful students. I convinced myself I was improving her work, making it better. You corrupted it, Isabella said quietly. You took something beautiful and turned it into a weapon. I didn't understand it. Albright admitted the words seemingly torn from him. Not really. I could reproduce the equations, but the underlying theory, only you understood that, Isabella. Dean Hamilton stood abruptly. Professor Albright, you're suspended immediately pending a full investigation. Ms. Rossi, the university offers its deepest apologies. Your expulsion will be reversed, your doctorate awarded retroactively, and a full public statement will be issued clearing your name. Not enough, Adrian said, speaking for the first time. Dr. Rossi deserves more than paper corrections. I'm establishing the Rossi Center for Ethical Scientific Innovation here at Columbia with a $50 million endowment. Dr. Rossi will serve as its founding director, ensuring that what happened to her never happens to another student. Isabella turned to him in shock. They hadn't discussed this. Adrian met her gaze steadily, and she saw he was serious. Deadly serious. Dr. Morrison jumped at the opportunity to salvage something from the disaster. That's extraordinarily generous, Mr. Sterling. The university would be honored. I have conditions, Isabella said, finding her voice. Full transparency in all research attribution, mandatory ethics courses for all science faculty, and a review board for disputed research claims that includes external members, not just university insiders. All acceptable, Morrison agreed immediately. As they hammered out details, Isabella's phone buzzed. Unknown number, but she knew who it would be. She stepped out to answer Agent Chen, following. Congratulations, Dr. Rossi. Hayes's voice was amused rather than angry. You've won this round quite thoroughly. It's over, Hayes. Your facilities are shut down. Your plan is exposed. My plan A is exposed, Hayes corrected. Did you really think I'd put all my eggs in one basket? While you've been playing in academic politics, I've been busy. Check the news, Doctor. Southeast Asia specifically. Isabella pulled up news sites on her phone, her blood running cold. 3 major power plants in Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore had suffered simultaneous failures. Rolling blackouts were affecting millions. Conventional sabotage, Hayes continued conversationally. Nothing traceable to me, of course, but it does create a certain urgency for alternative energy solutions, doesn't it? You're insane. I'm practical. The world needs your formula, Isabella. The real one. The question is whether it gets it through me or through Sterling. I'm offering you one last chance. Join me and I'll make you the richest scientist in history. Never. Then you'd better work fast. Because every day you delay in producing a working solution, more infrastructure will fail. More people will suffer. Their pain will be on your conscience, not mine. The line went dead. Isabella stood in the Columbia hallway, rage and determination warring in her chest. Agent Chen was already on her phone reporting the conversation and the Southeast Asian incidents. Adrian emerged from the conference room, saw her expression, and immediately knew something was wrong. She explained quickly, watching his jaw tighten with each word. He's escalating, Adrian said. We need to move faster. I need a team, Isabella said. Real scientists, the best minds available, and I need them yesterday. Done. I'll have my recruiters pull in everyone we can find. Money is no object. They left Columbia with the world shifted on its axis. Isabella was officially Dr. Isabella Rossi, vindicated and validated. But Hayes had made it clear the war was far from over. Back at Sterling Tower, the 42nd floor had been transformed into a research center. Adrian had worked through the night, bringing in equipment, computers, and most importantly, people. Isabella found herself facing a room full of physicists, chemists, and engineers, all looking at her expectantly. Ladies and gentlemen, Adrian said, meet Dr. Isabella Rossi. She's going to lead you in creating the future of energy storage. The real future, not the corrupted version Hayes is peddling. Isabella stood before them, feeling the weight of expectation. These were some of the brightest minds in the country, and they were all looking to her for direction. "I know some of you by reputation," she began, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Dr. Sarah Kim from MIT, Dr. James Wright from Caltech, Dr. Amelia Foster from Stanford. You're here because you're the best. But more importantly, you're here because you believe science should serve humanity, not corporate greed." She turned to the whiteboard, began writing equations. "This is my original formula, the real catalyst that can store energy at quantum levels. But one mind, even mine, isn't enough to perfect it quickly. We need to work together, check each other, build on each other's insights." Dr. Kim raised her hand. "The quantum coherence problem at room temperature, how did you solve it?" Isabella smiled, the first genuine smile she'd felt in hours. "Biomimicry. Nature already solved it in photosynthesis. Let me show you." The next hours blurred together in a symphony of scientific collaboration. Ideas flew, equations evolved, problems were identified and solved. Isabella found herself in her element, leading a team of peers who understood and appreciated her work. Adrian watched from his office, taking calls from investors, government officials, and industry leaders, all wanting to know about the Rossi catalyst. He fielded them all, buying Isabella time to work. But that evening, everything changed again. James Chen burst into the research center, his face grim. "We have a problem. Kendrick's gone." "What do you mean, gone?" Adrian demanded. "The FBI safe house where he was being held. The agents were gassed. Kendrick vanished. Professional extraction team." Isabella's blood ran cold. "Hayes, he's taking Kendrick." Her phone rang immediately, as if Hayes had been waiting for the MOSM to discover the kidnapping. "Dr. Rossi, I have your former colleague here. He's quite eager to share everything he knows about your work." "He doesn't understand it," Isabella said. "We've established that." "No, but he understands enough to be useful, and with the right motivation he might remember details he's forgotten. Details about your process, your techniques." Isabella heard Kendrick's voice in the background, pleading. Her stomach turned. "What do you want, Hayes?" "You know what I want. Your cooperation. But since you've refused, I'll make do with what Kendrick can provide. Unless, of course, you'd like to trade. You for him." "Don't." Adrian started, but Isabella was already responding. "Where and when?" "Isabella, no." Adrian grabbed her arm. "You can't." "I can't let him torture Kendrick for information," Isabella said quietly. "Even after everything, I can't have that on my conscience." Agent Chen took the phone. "Mr. Hayes, this is the FBI. Any harm to Dr. Kendrick will be prosecuted." Hayes laughed. "Good luck finding me to prosecute." "You have 2 hours, Dr. Rossi. There's a warehouse in Newark. I'll send the address. Come alone or Kendrick dies badly." The line went dead. The research center erupted in arguments, everyone talking at once. Adrian was adamant that Isabella couldn't go. Agent Chen was calling for backup teams. The other scientists were proposing alternatives. But Isabella was already moving, grabbing her coat and a flash drive containing her work. "I'm going." "Then I'm coming with you," Adrian said. "He said alone. He said you come alone. He didn't say you had to stay alone." Adrian's expression was steel. "James, prepare a team. Full tactical gear. We follow at a distance, move in when we have an opening." Isabella wanted to argue, but she saw the futility of it. Adrian Sterling wasn't a man who accepted no for an answer. The drive to Newark was tense, Isabella in one car, while Adrian's security team followed in others. While the warehouse district was dark, abandoned, the perfect place for an ambush. Isabella's hands shook as she got out of the car, walking toward the designated building. The warehouse was lit by industrial lights that created harsh shadows. Hayes stood in the center, impeccably dressed, as always, with Kendrick kneeling beside him, hands zip-tied, a gag in his mouth. "Dr. Rossi," Hayes said warmly, as if greeting her for tea. "So good of you to come." "Let him go," Isabella said. "I'm here." "Yes, you are. And you've brought friends, I see." Hayes pulled out a tablet showing feeds from security cameras. Adrian's team was visible surrounding the building. "Did you think I wouldn't notice? Did you think I'd really come alone?" Isabella countered. Hayes laughed. "Touché. Well, since we're all being honest, I should mention I have no intention of actually harming Kendrick. He's worthless to me. This was just about getting you here." "Why?" "To make you an offer you can't refuse." Hayes pulled out a thick folder. "These are documents showing that Sterling Industries has been cooking their books for years. Tax fraud, embezzlement, bribery. All fabricated, of course, but so well crafted that it would take years of legal battles to disprove. Years during which Adrian Sterling would be ruined." Isabella's jaw tightened. "You're threatening Adrian to get to me?" "I'm presenting you with a choice. Work with me and these documents disappear. Refuse and I destroy the man who believed in you." Isabella looked at Kendrick, pathetic and terrified, then at Hayes, smooth and confident. She thought of Adrian, who'd risked everything on her word, of her parents finally proud again, of the team of scientists working even now to perfect her formula. "You know what your problem is, Hayes," she said conversationally, walking closer. "You think everyone is as corrupt as you. You think everyone has a price. Everyone does." "No." Isabella pulled out the flash drive. "This contains my complete formula. Every note, every equation, every breakthrough. It's worth billions, maybe trillions." Hayes's eyes gleamed with greed. "You're giving it to me." "No." Isabella dropped the drive on the concrete and crushed it under her heel. "I'm showing you that some things matter more than money." Hayes's face contorted with rage. "You stupid—" The warehouse doors burst open. FBI agents flooded in, weapons drawn. But Hayes was already moving, hitting a button on his phone. Smoke grenades detonated throughout the warehouse, creating instant chaos. Isabella dropped to the ground, crawling toward Kendrick. She found him in the smoke, cutting his ties with a piece of broken glass. "Go!" she shouted over the chaos. A hand grabbed her arm. Hayes, his composed mask finally shattered, revealing the monster beneath. "You've ruined everything." Isabella twisted, using a self-defense move she'd learned during her paranoid years after the expulsion. Hayes stumbled back, and she ran, finding her way through the smoke by memory. She burst out of the warehouse to find Adrian waiting, catching her as she stumbled. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm—" An explosion rocked the warehouse. Not massive, but enough to destroy any evidence Hayes might have left behind. Through the smoke, Isabella saw a helicopter rising from behind the building. Hayes escaping again. Agent Chen appeared, coughing from the smoke. "He's gone. Probably heading for international waters." Isabella sagged against Adrian, exhaustion hitting her like a wave. "He'll be back." "Let him come," Adrian said fiercely. "We'll be ready." They returned to Sterling Tower to find the research team had made a breakthrough in their absence. Dr. Kim had solved a stability problem that had been plaguing the formula for years. The catalyst was not just viable, it was ready for prototype production. "How long until we can demonstrate it?" Isabella asked. 2 weeks, Dr. Wright said. "Maybe less if we push." "Then we push," Isabella decided. "We make it so public, so undeniable that Hayes becomes irrelevant. We give the world the solution it needs." Adrian's phone rang. It was the Secretary of Energy. "Mr. Sterling, the President, would like to meet with Dr. Rossi tomorrow. We're prepared to offer full government backing for the Rossi Catalyst project." Isabella heard the words as if from a distance. In 3 days, she'd gone from invisible waitress to presidential meetings. The transformation was dizzying. That night, as the team continued working, Isabella found herself on the roof of Sterling Tower, looking out over the city. Adrian joined her, bringing 2 cups of coffee. "You destroyed the only copy of your formula," he said. Isabella smiled. "No, I destroyed a flash drive full of recipes I downloaded from a cooking website. The real formula is up here." She tapped her temple and backed up on 7 different secure servers. Adrian laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "You played him. I learned from watching you. Besides, did you really think I'd carry the only copy of my life's work into a meeting with a psychopath?" They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights twinkle below. Finally, Adrian spoke. "What you've accomplished. It's extraordinary." "It's just the beginning," Isabella said. "Hayes is still out there. The energy crisis is real, and there are probably other Albrights and Kendricks stealing other students' work. But now you're in a position to stop them." Isabella turned to look at him, this man who'd believed a waitress's whisper and changed her life. "We're in a position to stop them." Something shifted between them in that moment, the professional partnership deepening into something more personal. But before either could act on it, James Chen appeared on the roof. "Sir, ma'am, you need to see this." They followed him to the research center, where every screen was showing the same breaking news. Hayes had released a statement from his yacht in international waters. He was claiming that the Rossi catalyst was actually his invention, that Isabella had stolen it from him, that the entire FBI investigation was a conspiracy to suppress his revolutionary technology. "He's trying to muddy the waters," Agent Chen said, "create enough doubt that no one knows what to believe." Isabella felt rage rise in her chest, then forced it down. "It doesn't matter what he claims. In 2 weeks, we'll have a working prototype. We'll demonstrate it publicly. The science will speak for itself." "And until then," Adrian asked, "until then we work. We perfect the catalyst. We make it so undeniably brilliant that no lie can touch it." She turned to her team. "Everyone who's willing to pull all-nighters for the next 2 weeks, raise your hand." Every hand went up. Isabella smiled, feeling the power of shared purpose. Hayes thought he could win with lies and money and threats. But Isabella had something more powerful, truth, brilliance, and a team of people who believed in changing the world. The battle with Hayes wasn't over, but the war had shifted. It was no longer about exposing his crimes or stopping his plans. It was about building something so magnificent that his schemes became irrelevant. And Dr. Isabella Rossi, the waitress who'd whispered truth to power, was exactly the person to do it. The next 2 weeks blurred into a symphony of sleepless nights and breakthrough moments. Isabella lived in the lab, catching fragments of sleep on a cot Adrian had installed in a corner office. Her team worked with the fervor of people who knew they were making history. Every successful test brought them closer to the public demonstration that would change everything. But Hayes wasn't idle. Every morning brought new attacks, patent challenges, regulatory complaints, even a staged protest outside Sterling Tower claiming the Rossi catalyst would cause environmental damage. Isabella watched it all with growing frustration, but Adrian remained strategically calm. "He's desperate," Adrian observed on day 10, watching the protesters from his office window. "These are amateur moves. He knows we're close." Isabella was reviewing test results when her phone rang. Her mother's number, but when she answered, it wasn't Maria's voice. "Dr. Rossi." "Hayes." Your parents are having coffee at their favorite cafe in Newark, the little place on Broad Street. Your father orders the same thing every time: black coffee and a blueberry muffin. Isabella's blood turned to ice. If you touch them. I won't need to if you're reasonable. The demonstration in 4 days, cancel it. Announce that the formula needs more work, that it's not ready. You're threatening my parents. Adrian was already on another phone alerting security. Within minutes, James Chen confirmed that Isabella's parents were safe security detail already moving to protect them. Threats won't stop us, Hayes, Isabella said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. They just prove how afraid you are. Afraid, my dear doctor. I own energy facilities in 17 countries. I have contracts worth billions. One graduate student with a chemistry set doesn't frighten me. Then why are you calling? Silence. Then the demonstration. Call it off, or I'll reveal something that will destroy you more thoroughly than Albright ever could. There's nothing to reveal. My life is an open book now. Really? What about the psychiatric hold in your junior year? The suicide attempt that your family hushed up, mental instability, doesn't play well with government contracts. Isabella felt the world tilt. That was supposed to be sealed private medical information from her darkest moment, when the pressure of undergraduate studies had nearly broken her. Adrian took the phone from her nerveless fingers. Hayes, this is Sterling. You've just confessed to obtaining private medical records illegally. That's a federal crime. Prove it, Hayes said smoothly. But imagine the headlines. Unstable scientist behind controversial energy project. The doubt alone will kill government support. Adrian ended the call and immediately turned to Isabella. Whatever he's talking about, it doesn't matter. It does, Isabella said quietly. It's true. Junior year, I was 19, the pressure was crushing, and I tried to... She couldn't finish the sentence. And you survived, Adrian said firmly. You got help, you got better, and you went on to create something brilliant. That's not weakness, Isabella. That's strength. Dr. Kim, who'd overheard, approached them. Dr. Rossi, half the scientists I know have struggled with mental health. The pressure we put on ourselves, the isolation of research, it takes a toll. If Hayes thinks that makes you weak, he doesn't understand scientists at all. One by one, the team members shared their own struggles: anxiety, depression, imposter syndrome. Dr. Wright talked about his panic attacks during his PhD defense. Dr. Foster revealed her ongoing therapy for perfectionism. The solidarity was overwhelming. We stand together, Dr. Wright said simply. If Hayes wants to attack one of us, he attacks all of us. Isabella felt tears prick her eyes, but before she could respond, James Chen burst in. We have a problem. The prototype, someone sabotaged it. They ran to the testing facility in the building's basement. The prototype catalyst unit, their proof of concept, was destroyed. Acid had been poured over critical components, reducing months of work to corroded metal. How? Adrian demanded. This facility is supposed to be secure. James pulled up security footage on his tablet. It showed a figure in a Sterling Industries maintenance uniform, face obscured by a cap, entering the facility with a cleaning cart. Fake ID, fake credentials, professional job. Isabella stared at the destroyed prototype, feeling the weight of defeat. 4 days until the demonstration. They'd promised the president, the energy secretary, the media, and now they had nothing to show. We rebuild, she said, suddenly surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. We have the specs, the materials. We can rebuild. In 4 days, Dr. Foster asked skeptically. In 3 days, we present on schedule. Isabella turned to her team. This is what Hayes doesn't understand. He thinks destroying things is power. But we're builders, we're creators, and we're going to create something magnificent. The next 72 hours were legendary in the annals of Sterling Industries. Isabella's team worked in shifts, but she never left. Adrian brought in engineers from every division of his company. The building became a hive of focused activity. Even Isabella's parents came, her mother organizing food deliveries, while her father, despite his weakness, sat with Isabella during her brief breaks, offering silent support. News of the sabotage had leaked, and the media was calling it the Manhattan Project of Energy. The public was riveted. #Rossi Catalyst began trending globally. Support poured in from unexpected sources. Rival tech companies offered equipment. Universities sent graduate students to help. Even competing energy firms provided materials. Hayes had miscalculated. His attack hadn't created doubt. It had created a movement. On the morning of the demonstration, Isabella stood in the Javits Center looking at the assembled crowd. The president's science advisor was there, along with energy ministers from 12 countries, hundreds of journalists and thousands of citizens who'd won lottery tickets to attend. The rebuilt prototype sat on stage, gleaming under the lights. Adrian stood beside her, and she was grateful for his steady presence. "Ready?" "No," Isabella admitted, "but that's never stopped me before." As she walked onto the stage, the crowd fell silent. Isabella looked out at the sea of faces, took a breath, and began. 6 years ago, I discovered something that could change the world. It was stolen from me, corrupted, and nearly turned into a weapon. But truth has a way of surfacing, and science belongs to all of us. She launched into her presentation, explaining the quantum mechanics in terms anyone could understand. She showed how nature had solved the energy storage problem in every leaf, every blade of grass. She demonstrated how her catalyst mimicked and improved on nature's solution. Then came the moment of truth, the prototype activation. Isabella turned the key, initiated the startup sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the displays lit up, showing energy storage at levels that shouldn't be possible, efficiency rates that broke every known limit. The crowd erupted. Scientists were crying. Energy ministers were frantically calling their governments. The president's advisor was already on the phone with the White House. But Isabella wasn't done. She pulled up a global map on the screen behind her. The Rossi catalyst will be open source. No patents, no exclusive licenses. Every nation, every company, every researcher who wants to build on this work will have free access to it. Adrian hadn't known about this decision. She saw his surprise, then his admiration. She was giving away billions in potential profit, but she was also ensuring that no one, not Hayes, not anyone, could monopolize the technology. "This is my gift to the world," Isabella continued. "Energy storage that could end our dependence on fossil fuels, that could bring power to the poorest villages, that could stop climate change in its tracks. It belongs to everyone." The standing ovation lasted 10 minutes. As Isabella left the stage, her legs shaking with exhaustion and relief, her phone rang. She expected Hayes, but it was Agent Chen. "Dr. Rossi, we've just arrested Richard Hayes. He was attempting to flee the country, but someone tipped off Interpol about his location." "Who?" "Kendrick. He's been working with us since the warehouse incident. Apparently, Hayes threatening his life changed his perspective on loyalty." Isabella felt a strange mix of satisfaction and emptiness. Hayes was finished, but the victory felt anticlimactic after everything. She found Kendrick waiting in the lobby, looking haggard but determined. "Isabella, I know apologies mean nothing, but I need to try. I was weak, greedy, stupid. I let ambition override everything: morality, friendship, basic human decency." "You helped steal 6 years of my life," Isabella said quietly. I know. I can't give those years back. But I can give you this. He handed her a thick folder. Every communication with Hayes, every document about the stolen research, and something else evidence of 12 other cases where Albright stole student work. You weren't the only one. Isabella stared at the folder, then at Kendrick. Why? Because someone needs to stop it from happening again. And because... He paused, swallowing hard. Because I need to try to be the scientist I once wanted to be. Before I lost my way. Isabella took the folder. She wouldn't forgive him, not yet, maybe not ever. But she could acknowledge his attempt at redemption. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. The Rossi Center for Ethical Scientific Innovation opened at Columbia with Isabella as its director. She insisted on teaching one undergraduate course, remembering what it was like to be young and brilliant and vulnerable to those who would exploit that brilliance. Hayes's trial became international news. The full scope of his conspiracy was staggering, not just the corrupted catalyst facilities, but a network of industrial espionage and sabotage spanning decades. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison, his empire dismantled, his assets frozen. Albright lost his tenure, his publications were reviewed, and many retracted, and he faced criminal charges for theft of intellectual property. The other students he'd exploited came forward, and Isabella helped them reclaim their work. But the real victory was in the labs around the world, where the Rossi catalyst was being built, improved, adapted. Within 6 months, the first commercial facilities were operational. Within a year, entire cities were running on quantum energy storage. Isabella stood in her new office at the Rossi Center, looking out at the Columbia campus where her journey had begun. Her PhD diploma hung on the wall, properly earned, finally acknowledged. Photos covered her desk, her parents at the White House ceremony, where she received the Presidential Medal of Science, her team celebrating their first successful test, and one that made her smile every time she saw it, the Sterling Industries holiday party, where Adrian had finally asked her to dinner, not as a colleague, but as something more. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. A young graduate student entered, nervous and excited. Dr. Rossi, I think I've found something in the quantum mechanics equations. A possible improvement to the catalyst efficiency. Isabella smiled, remembering herself at that age, full of ideas and dreams. Show me. As the student began explaining, Isabella listened with the attention she'd once craved from her professors. She asked questions, offered suggestions, and when the student mentioned she was worried about a senior professor claiming credit for her work, Isabella's expression grew serious. That won't happen here, she said firmly. Your work is your work. We document everything, timestamp everything, and protect our students' intellectual property. With the same fervor, we protect our research. The student left an hour later, glowing with the validation of being heard and believed. Isabella returned to her own work, not on the catalyst that was complete, but on the next breakthrough, the next impossible problem that might have an elegant solution. Her phone buzzed with a text from Adrian. Dinner at 8. That little Italian place you like. She smiled, typing back, only if you promise not to sign any $100 million deals over appetizers. No promises. I've heard the waitstaff there gives excellent advice. Isabella laughed, remembering that night at Aurelia that felt like a lifetime ago. The waitress who'd whispered 4 words was gone, transformed into Dr. Isabella Rossi, inventor, professor, and revolutionary. But sometimes in quiet moments, she remembered the courage it had taken to lean in and whisper truth to power. A year later, at the Nobel Prize ceremony in Stockholm, Isabella stood at the podium looking out at an audience that included heads of state, scientific luminaries, and her parents, her father, healthy now, thanks to treatments funded by her success. Adrian sat in the front row, the engagement ring she wore catching the light as she gestured. Science. She began her acceptance speech, is not about individual glory. It's about collective human achievement. Every discovery builds on those who came before, reaches toward those who will come after. My work was stolen once by those who saw it as property to be owned. Today, it belongs to the world as all great discoveries should. She talked about the dark years, the time spent in exile from her calling, not to garner sympathy, but to give hope to every brilliant mind that had been silenced, overlooked, or exploited. She talked about the whisper that changed everything, the importance of speaking truth even when your voice shakes. To every young scientist watching, she concluded, remember this, your ideas matter, your voice matters, and sometimes the smallest whisper can become a roar that changes the world. The applause was thunderous, but Isabella barely heard it. She was thinking about tomorrow, about the new lab she was building, the next generation of scientists she was training, the problems yet to be solved. Richard Hayes watched the ceremony from his prison cell, his empire gone, his freedom forfeit. He'd been the billionaire with all the power, and she'd been a waitress with nothing but the truth. But truth, it turned out, was the stronger currency. Back in New York at the Sterling Rossi Innovation Center, their joint venture that had already produced 3 more breakthrough technologies, the night cleaning staff worked their way through the building. One of them, a young woman working her way through community college, paused at a display case in the lobby. It held a simple black and white waitress uniform preserved behind glass, with a small placard. Dr. Isabella Rossi wore this uniform while working at Aurelia restaurant. It was in this uniform that she recognized the flawed formula that could have caused a national catastrophe and had the courage to speak up. Never underestimate anyone based on their current circumstances. Brilliance can emerge from anywhere, and courage often comes from those society overlooks. The young woman smiled, adjusted her own uniform, and continued her work. She was studying chemistry at night, had her own ideas about molecular bonds that her professors said were impossible. But if a waitress could become a Nobel laureate, if a whisper could topple a conspiracy, then maybe her ideas weren't so impossible after all. The next morning, Isabella found a note slipped under her office door. Handwritten, careful script. Dr. Rossi, I'm Elena Martinez, night janitor and chemistry student. I have an idea about polymer chains that might interest you. I know you're busy, but if you have time, I'll be cleaning the 5th floor Tuesday at 9 p.m. Isabella smiled, remembering another woman who'd been invisible in a uniform, carrying impossible dreams. She marked her calendar Tuesday 9 p.m. Meet with Elena Martinez. The cycle continued. Brilliance recognized courage, rewarded truth, elevated. The waitress who had whispered had become a beacon showing others that their whispers mattered too. In the end, Isabella's greatest achievement wasn't the Rossi catalyst, though it revolutionized global energy. It wasn't the Nobel Prize, though it recognized her brilliance. It was the system she built to ensure that no brilliant mind would be silenced again, that every whisper of truth would be heard, that every Elena Martinez would have a Dr. Rossi to believe in them. The Manhattan skyline glittered outside her office window, a city powered increasingly by her invention. But Isabella wasn't looking at the lights. She was reviewing Elena's proposal about polymer chains, seeing in the janitor's careful notes the spark of something extraordinary. She picked up her phone, called Adrian. Cancel dinner Thursday. I'll be working late with a student. The janitor, Adrian asked, not surprised. He'd learned to recognize Isabella's excitement about new talent. The future Dr. Martinez, Isabella corrected. She just doesn't know it yet. As the sun set over New York, Dr. Isabella Rossi, once a waitress who dared to whisper, now a visionary, who shouted truth from the highest platforms, turned back to her work. There were more problems to solve, more brilliance to nurture, more whispers to amplify into roars. The formula that had almost destroyed her had become her triumph. The whisper that could have been ignored had prevented catastrophe. The waitress who'd been invisible had become unforgettable. And this was just the beginning.